Today we're going to be talking about, with a terrific panel, about fixed-wing business models that we believe are going to emerge as electric technology evolves. And we have four terrific panelists here today. I'll let each of you introduce yourselves. And there was going to be a clicker here because I think somebody had a video. Okay, great. So Bruno, why don't you start, and then I'll introduce myself last, since Alistair's already done that anyway.
Okay. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. This networking thing is really not my thing, but I've really met a lot of nice people here the last couple days, and it's really been, everyone's been very kind, and it's been a great experience. We're going to show a video to explain. Yeah. A lot of you know me from the Cafe Foundation, and what we're going to show you here now is what I'm doing now with the eGenius team from the NASA Green Flight Challenge.
Now let's hope this works. No, we got float up first, so let's hold. Work the technology here. Okay, we'll get to your video in a second because I think Tom's queued up first. Is that it?
That's
okay.
it.
Great.
MetroHop will transform the way we move within metropolitan areas. MetroHop is an all-electric short takeoff and landing aircraft. It uses well-established aviation technology that provides a clear path to certification. The planes operate out of busy skyport stations that easily integrate into cityscapes around the globe. This trillion-dollar industry can operate on fares as low as $39, making it an accessible and inclusive method of travel for millions of people. The MetroHop plane is fast, flying at 250 miles per hour. In the San Francisco Bay Area, for example, it would take just under 10 minutes to travel from Embarcadero Center in San Francisco to San Jose International Airport in Santa Clara. The International Patent-Pending Landing Gear System allows the plane to take off and land in 60 meters. Powered wheels drive the plane to takeoff speed. Takeoff is fast and nearly silent. The plane is as quiet as an electric car, which means that it can fly subtly and peacefully overhead, day or night. The landing gear system allows the plane to land accurately and smoothly. As the plane flies over the landing marks, the motorized landing gear legs drive down to the ground. This is how MetroHop is able to land gently and reliably in most weather conditions. Using modern sensors, the MetroHop plane is aware of its environment and can react to an event before it becomes an incident. This is to ensure an unprecedented level of safety and comfort for all passengers. High passenger volume and efficiency within the skyport stations, such as robotic battery swapping, keep fares low and profit margins high. A single station can handle 1,000 passengers per hour. In an urban area with 50 stations, this translates into 200 million passengers a year and $10 billion in revenue. This is not a tool for the elite, but a method to transform the way we all move within metropolitan areas. This future is within reach. Come join us on our journey to develop a practical and achievable path to urban air mobility.
Great. Thanks, Bruno. Rob, do you want to talk about something that's probably a little closer in than what Bruno's doing?
Sure. So I apologize, I don't have any fancy videos or slideshow presentations. When I got invited to come to this group, I was head of Mokulele Airlines, and we were the second largest commuter airline in the state of Hawaii, doing about 120 departures a day, flying 22,000 people a month, 9 seats at a time. And very traditional kind of airline with normal distribution and all the GDSs and the online travel agencies. And since being invited to come here now, we were acquired by Southern Airways Express. And so now, depending on the measure, we are probably the largest 135 scheduled airline in the country. So that's brought all new exciting opportunities and challenges, and we've kind of built on what Mokulele had already started, but now we have fully functioning e-ticket and baggage agreements with both Alaska and American Airlines. So as a 135 carrier, that's quite exciting to have those kinds of opportunities. But it also creates, challenges with our scale too. So, we definitely represent the old school traditional style of airline architecture.
And you're also working with Ampere on the SkyMaster conversion, correct?
We are. I've been working with those guys at Ampere almost a couple years now, and we're really excited about the opportunity that kind of cutting edge technology operates. They, through their partners, Elemental Accelerator, was a big clean energy fund out in Hawaii. So they are going to be doing their test flying in a 337 branded Mokulele with Mokulele pilots. I think I get to be one of the first ones, so I'm pretty jazzed about that. And starting, I believe in January, we'll be doing test flying between the Kahului Airport and the Hana Airport as kind of a representative route structure for the first electric commuter aircraft.
Terrific. And Tom, let me see if I can queue up your 2 or 3 slides. Here you go. You've got it.
This clicker? Can I borrow the clicker while you're...
Go ahead.
I could use a pointer too. There you go. Thank you. Hi, well, my name is Tom Hsieh. I'm with Float. Float stands for Fly Over All Traffic, and traffic is the issue that we're trying to address. In the U.S., there are 4.5 million supercommuters. Those are defined as people who are driving over 90 minutes to work. That's over 3 hours a day. In Southern California alone, there are 750,000 supercommuters. The issue is being exacerbated by the housing crisis, and it's just getting worse. So beginning November 18-ish, we are going to turn this on. We'll start flying people to work across Southern California using existing airports, existing FAA regulations, and existing aircraft. So we're going to launch in LA and then expand to additional markets. This past week, I had to commute from Laverne, California to Santa Monica, and that's a 45-mile trip. It took me 2.5 to 3 hours each way. That means I was spending 5 to 6 hours on the road every day. That flight from Laverne Airport to Santa Monica Airport is 15 minutes long. One day, the advanced new exotic eVTOLs will finally be FAA certified and available. We want to be in the position where we can acquire that equipment and deploy it in our short segment, high-frequency, temperate climate environment, and that would be a very nice hardware upgrade for us. But until then, we will be flying the very reliable, efficient, and comfortable Cessna Caravan, which, as you know, seats 9 passengers. We will be charging a monthly subscription of $12.50 a month, starting at $12.50 a month, to take people Monday to Friday to work 20 days a month. That's about $30 each way, and we're going to save them hours a day. That's the flight schedule for our first plane and real customers. We have 500 people on our waiting list. Exactly. So we're going to start flying in November. We're building for the future of urban aviation by flying today. Thank you.
Terrific. And you're partnering with Rob in this as well, right? Wonderful. And Uma, why don't you introduce yourself quickly?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Subramanian. I am the CEO of Aero Technologies. I have no slides because we're still in stealth, but suffice to say that we are having a fundamental rethink about the premium air travel market using conventional aircraft. However, before I was running Aero, I was at Airbus, where I was the founding CEO of VOOM. You're going to hear a lot more about VOOM this afternoon. But I am excited to be here, part of the conversation.
Terrific, thank you. So we're very excited at DiamondStream about fixed-wing aviation and electric, partially because we think it's much nearer in than some of the other VTOL concepts that have come out, and you can see the economics very, very clearly for this short haul, and partially because of our experience with Volaris, which was if you can actually stimulate air traffic, great things happen for society, and you take people out of cars. Our view on this market is that up to 10% of intercity car travel could come out due to regional aircraft models or Metro Air models like the one that Tom's describing. So why don't we start there, and then it would be great to contrast that with some of the more UAM type of thinking that Bruno, you were talking about, and Uma, you've had experience with. So guys, what's the difference in terms of business model between a regional aircraft model like the one that you operate at Mokulele, and I know you've operated in other fixed wing 135 in the past, and Tom, what you're doing? What's the practical difference in the business models? What drives them?
So probably the biggest challenge that we have is just, as you're all aware, regulation forced 135 into the 9-seat space, and so as soon as you want to publish a schedule and you go to 10 seats, now you're 121. And so I believe strongly that's a big part of the reason that you don't see aircraft manufactured. You see 9-seat aircraft manufactured, and then it jumps up to 46, 50, 70-seat aircraft, and it's because of the regulation gap that forces us into this tiny little space. And the reality of the situation is the cost structure of being part of the old legacy networks is very prohibitive on a 9-seat scale. And really, the truth be told, from my perspective, after having done 135 aviation a long time now, is the only way that it really works is you either have to have a government subsidy, so you have artificially low fares, or you have to have some barrier that you're not really competing with a car. So you have to have, like I operate in islands where you can't drive, so a mountain range, an international border, or like what Tom's trying to solve, the extreme congestion of the inner city. But if you just try to start a Mokulele or a Southern Airways Express kind of airline on a free market basis in the middle of the country, it would be a very, very tough challenge.
And just why aren't you competitive with cars? What's the problem? In other words, why won't the business model compete with cars? Because if you look at regional aviation, right, it's declined every year for the last 30 years.
Part of it is that you have so much fixed cost involved, so you have the cost of the equipment and the cost of pilots, and pilots' costs keep escalating as the shortage increases, and you only have 9 seats to offset it. And so it's very difficult to yield manage when you only have 9 seats. You can't, it's tough to run advanced purchase or fare sales when you only have 9 seats. So you just don't really have the opportunity to make up the revenue on the top side. And then with the Cessna Caravan especially, you really don't have the speed advantage when you have nice big open roads in the middle of the country. So between just the speed differential and the fixed cost involved, it makes it a big challenge.
Great. Tom, how's that different? How's what Rob's doing different than what you're proposing?
Well, I think our business model is pretty different from what most people have discussed here in this conference so far. We're not on demand, right? We're not trying to sell single tickets. You can think of us like a van pool, right? So we're really and it's a monthly subscription. It's not, you're paying for that one seat on that one plane and that one route, right, to take you to work, and then in the afternoon, it's that same seat. It's going to take you back home. So it's a very different model. We're not going to be able to do on-demand flights. That's not our goal to start. Our goal is to just solve the commute problem, get people to and from work. That's so a lot of this kind of on-demand, go where you want, when you want. We're taking a very different approach, but we think a very pragmatic approach to start a business.
So, intercity, intra-city. Uma, is it gonna work? You gonna be able to move people around intra-city with fixed-wing aircraft?
Well, I think some of the challenges are around multimodality, and so what we saw is that as the barriers to the transport, to the journey increase, it becomes less and less convenient. So the joy and the kind of beauty of the eVTOL ecosystem and the helicopter model is that you land where you need to go. And with a model where you go airport to airport, it's harder because there's still a car component on either end. And so is the journey in the aggregate truly a time saver is a question that remains to be seen. I think Laverne to Santa Monica probably during rush hour, but there are other places where the time saving may net out neutral. So for example, SFO to Oakland, if you actually have to land and take off from the FBO, then there may not be any time savings. So I think it remains to be seen. I think it's certainly interesting and worth a shot.
Yeah, and there's the famous race in the 1970s, right, between the helicopter service from JFK and the car. And the New York Times it illustrates exactly that. And how do you guys play in this debate, Bruno?
Well, the first thing is we don't see this, especially initially, as a commuter solution. It's much more a business tool, and it is an on-demand service. And for us, it's all about high utilization, because the fixed costs, yes, are very high. And so it's about speed as far as the turnaround time. It's about speed as far as the plane's landing and taking off. And then speed during the flight. And it's not because getting to San Jose is, if we get there in 15 minutes, to the average person using that, they don't care. But to the operator, that's 50% more planes if he's not going in 10 minutes and going in 15 minutes. So for us, it's just about high utilization to be able to keep the cost where we want it to be.
So now if we insert electric fixed wing into the model, what happens? Rob, what happens to your concern about racing cars with a Caravan? How does it change?
It dramatically changes the dynamic for us. With we're projecting that with the first model of the Ampere retrofit of Cessna Caravan, we could reduce direct operating costs by as much as 60%. So what that really does for us is opens up potential city pairs that just today are not viable with a gas turbine engine and a $400,000 overhaul bill, versus an electric motor that has exponentially more life in it and exponentially lower costs. So we really look at this as a game changer as far as cities that we could serve on an economically viable basis.
Right. And how does that take your price point down in your model? If you're at $1,250 and you take direct operating costs down by 60%, does the price to commute per month become $500 or?
No, I mean, it'll take it down, but there are other costs in there. But still, the fact that we have all our flights are short segments, right? So they're going to be 15 minutes long. I mean, and just the wear and tear on the engine, the time between overhaul gets shortened, and to not have to have that in an electric engine, I think that would just be really amazing. And also to just be able to, for commuters to know, I mean, initially we'll already be more fuel efficient than 9 different people driving their cars 50 miles, right? So there's already a fuel efficiency. But for them to know that they're going to have a positive environmental impact, I think is tremendous.
If I may take a slightly contrarian viewpoint, we don't actually know what the reliability on electric motors are going to be at scale when you operate them on these aircraft, right? And so while the promises are really great, I think there is some risk that if we go towards this all-electric model, we don't actually know what the life and the reliability is going to be. And so I think, is it 60% or is it 6% is still something that remains to be seen. I think like when you design an aircraft from scratch, like to be electric, it's different than if you go down the retrofit path.
Well, go ahead, Bruno.
I was going to say there's also a real value proposition if you can get there in 15 minutes, that there's a point where it does not need to be any cheaper than $40 or $30 where you're at. So I think that's a really important point. I mean, it really changes things when the idea that you can get up and go somewhere and be there in 10 minutes, it changes your idea of whether you're going to choose to go. When you start looking at going somewhere and it's going to take you 40 minutes versus 10 minutes, when it's 10 minutes, you just go. When it's 40 minutes, you start thinking about it. When it's 2 hours, you start trying to do something else. So that's I think, a big part of all this, too.
So we've got 2 classic aviation things, right? Stimulation is how directly can you get there and how cheaply can you get there, right? And so what I hear you guys saying is, if you do fixed wing, you might not get there as directly, but you're probably going to get there a lot cheaper. And if you take, just Uber's numbers of $250 a seat mile at maturity, that's pretty darn expensive relative to a car, but it's maybe a little bit more direct. So what's going to be the bigger market?
Well, we believe that with the cost savings of electric retrofit, and I think that's an excellent point. It is unknown that what is the actual savings going to be, but for us, it's a choice between if a built from scratch airplane comes 5 years or 7 years down the road, and a retrofit is 2 years down the road, and we get to start realizing some savings, then that kind of is a no-brainer for us. Additionally, if we're looking down the barrel of a $400,000 overhaul and it's maybe $600,000 to retrofit to an electric engine, well then that's a pretty low risk to try the technology as well. So we're invested in the fixed wing market. That's what we do. That's our wheelhouse. So we think there's obviously going to be enough business there for lots of different players. Who's to say what is the bigger market? That remains to be seen. But I think there's going to be enough space in the future in urban mobility for all of us to have a piece of the pie.
What do you think, Uma?
So fundamentally, I think that having spent the last sort of 3.5 years looking at electric VTOL, I think that point-to-point is truly the answer in this space. I won't talk too much about VOOM, but in Sao Paulo, you could fly in 12 minutes from the airport to the city center, a journey that might otherwise take you 4 hours. That makes sense. However, if you then have to land and you're more than 2 kilometers away from where you need to go, you're sitting in traffic for another hour, which negates a lot of the time-saving benefit. So I think I'm very much of the you need to go to the point you're going to camp. That said, however, there's only 30 cities in the world that have the infrastructure to enable you to do that today. So the massive infrastructure cost to get to the point where urban air mobility is truly ubiquitous is massive. And so I think there's a time and a time phasing here. But there are a lot of cities in the world where you could go and do urban air mobility today. And I think it's probably the right answer. Sorry, Tony.
So with urban air mobility, the way we see this is it's not going to happen in the next 2-3 years. There's a ways to go. These planes have to be autonomous. The infrastructure needs to be built. We are seeing developers are looking at this because there was a speaker earlier this week or yesterday that spoke about that, how having an airport on top of your building all of a sudden really adds to your asset. And then if there are enough airports, and that is key, that you have to have enough skyports, but at the moment you start having enough of them out there, these become 5-10 minute rides. It's the need is infinite. I mean, at that point, it's something that you look at, hundreds of thousands of people flying, and that's the distances we go easily. If it's 10 minutes away, we get up and go do it. And again, so the capacity there is the limiting factor.
So Tom, what we're hearing on the UAM side is, hey, you got to put the infrastructure and the transportation points where the people are. Is there another view where the infrastructure becomes the point where the people go to?
Yeah, I think that that somewhat already exists in LA. So if you think about large employers, so think of an employer like SpaceX with 7,500 employees. Let's look at it at the Hawthorne Airport. There is no last mile. And you also think of employers like UCLA, which operates 400 van pools today. And if you could get those people to a closer airport, their transportation department would love to just run that shuttle from that Santa Monica Airport to their campus. It's so I think that it would be great if it was more direct, but and for individual travelers on individual flights, you may be willing to pay more for that. We're just trying to solve a very different kind of problem, very specific problem for the everyday commuter, and they're taking the train today, they're taking their car today. So I think that's a very different model. So if we're used to taking a train, I mean, you don't get to decide where those train stations are, right? And you figure it out. You figure out how to get there to and from.
Well, I think it's an interesting debate because if you look at just here in San Francisco, right, the mid-market project, BART, the infrastructure was there, so they decided to build up where the infrastructure was. So if the airport's there, do you build out the employment infrastructure around the airport? Well, maybe it depends on what kind of employees you have. There's some employees who want to live in San Francisco and have the lifestyle here, but there's some employees who want to live in Tracy and they might find commuting via something like your concept directly into San Carlos. And
Yeah, that's a great point in terms of cause and effect. So what you see around train stations is that a lot of transit-oriented design, the billions and billions of dollars being designed for mixed use around train stations. So once you put the station there, all of a sudden that becomes a development effort. We want to see that happen with municipal airports and general aviation airports again, that those become destinations and development happens there because you can get anywhere from there.
Great. Okay, let's take some audience questions here. Rob and Tom, if there was a certified all-electric Caravan on the market today, would you guys buy it?
Assuming that the economics are as advertised, absolutely we would. You know, if nothing else, even if it was similar, you have the whole green aspect to it, that we're reducing our carbon footprint, we're, you know, a better neighbor to the environment, and is, you know, ostensibly it should be less noisy than a gas turbine engine. So absolutely, we would be first in line, and that's the reason that our partnership with Ampere has been so important to us, that we want to be first in line when that technology finally arrives.
So yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I want to underscore the noise thing. So yeah, if there was an electric engine available today, and I mean, what we're experiencing from the electric engines, that they're much quieter, and that's a big issue for the general aviation airports, municipal airports. So we can solve that. That's going to go a long way.
Terrific. Yeah, an all-electric Caravan would be great. There's a debate about whether without a new airframe design, you're really going to be able to get all those economies. But if it works, you're going to have a very low-cost aircraft relatively soon, right? You're going to be able to rebuild out these.
Well, and that's exactly it. And I think that's kind of what Tom is banking on too. Is that if we're in the market many years better than maybe a perfect solution of a eVTOL kind of aircraft, then, you know, we have the position that we can obviously evolve into those kinds of equipment too, where it makes sense. But in the meantime, that we've been serving the market, you know, with something that, even if it's imperfect, it's better than what we have now.
Right. What does Aero Technologies actually do? And I'm going to answer for you, Uma. That's for Uma to know and for you guys to find out very soon.
Thank you for making my mysterious case for me. Suffice to say, Aero is in the business of flying people, and there will be a lot more information forthcoming.
Yeah. Here's a great question. How does Float's model efficiently use the asset with only commute times being targeted? This is a great question.
Yeah, so the commute time in LA ranges from like 5:30 to 10 a.m. in the morning, and then begins at like 3 till 7. Right. So we do have a window in the middle of the day, say from 10 to 2, that we will be doing kind of more single ticket flights between popular destinations, or maybe getting people between major airports. Those are options. But with just the core commute hours of 6 to 9, 3 to 6, I mean, those aircraft will be very well used.
So interesting, right? It's a mixed scheduled charter business model, right? Potentially.
Yeah, sure, yeah, absolutely.
Potentially,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I think there was a question on there about Surf Air. And we're very different business model than Surf Air. Obviously, we're not going, between like Northern California and Southern California. We're only between Southern California airports. And then I don't think they had reserve seats. I think we're not an all-you-can-eat model. It's not you can't just fly anytime you want. You're choosing the route you want to fly every day. And you just get to do that flight every day, and so that's it's a very different model. But that's reserved for you. That's it.
Okay, one more question for you, and then we'll get some for some other people. So the Surf Air model, a lot of questions about the viability of that model. $22,000+ subscription service. You guys are at $1,200, but for much shorter flights. Why is this different than Surf Air? Why Surf Air struggled to make that work economically? Why will Float not?
Well, we're hitting a very different part of the market segment, right? So with $1,250, that's if you're taking a MetroLink train, that's about how much you're paying. Your all-in cost for driving your car is about $1,250 a month. Anyway, if you can figure in your car expenses, your gasoline, and that's not even figuring parking if you have to do parking at the end. So we're targeting a very different market segment. We're trying to get, you know, the programmer that's in the cubicle, not necessarily the guy in the corner office, although they're free to fly, you know, to subscribe with us as well. And so we're talking about a much larger base. We're trying to grow this to a much larger operation, not just in the LA market, but across lots of metropolitans. And then the issue of, like, you know, having the subscription, but then you have to kind of reserve and hope that there's a seat when you want to go. That's just not the way we work. I mean, you know, that's your seat every day. And if you're sick that day, that seat's empty. So we are thinking about doing kind of a resale market, you know, kind of for days that you're absent.
Or a company that would buy.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah. There are businesses that are talking to us about, you know, certain number of seats for their employees, and they may not be the same employees every day because they're between two major offices.
Right.
Corporate commuting model, sort of an interesting B2B commuting model.
Yeah.
So Rob, if you get this explosion in demand into tertiary airports, you're going to be able to use your FBO. Is that going to work? Can they scale out to manage that kind of volume?
Previous airlines that I've been involved with, we have used FBO facilities. We've even have had success with using FBOs even at major airports when terminal space and gate space was prohibitively expensive. Typically, a lot of times FBOs, you can negotiate either free or really, really cheap parking. So yeah, when we get to the tertiary airports, definitely I think that the FBO solution is the way to go. But currently, in our current business model, it's all terminal to terminal. Where we can, we use commuter terminals that often are either non-sterile or less expensive. But in the future, when we start, you know, being able to branch out and go more places, we definitely would utilize, you know, FBO kind of situations.
You think you're still going to use FBO level security once you see a lot of increase in demand on these 9-seat aircraft models?
Well, we really kind of have a security workaround as it is now, because in the entire state of Hawaii, we don't operate from any sterile terminals. So we have our own built-in protocols. We still have access to the selectee no-fly list, and we do things that keep our passengers secure, but we don't utilize the full oppressive nature of the TSA. So, you know, we tell people you can keep your bottle of water, keep your shoes on, and keep your dignity, and still get on a Mokulele airplane.
Very good. All right, Uma, where do you see the market going for JSX, JetSmarter, Ultimate Shuttle model?
Yeah, so I take the view that fundamentally models that are asset light are really, really hard to make work. The industry, the private jet industry particularly, is not structured in a way that enables these models to really scale. The reason being, the OEMs spend billions of dollars in developing new platforms. They sell only a few hundred aircraft. The acquisition costs are high. Even if you buy a fully depreciated asset, the price is still high, and you need to fly a lot more hours than these aircraft are currently flying. And then the people that own these private jets are fundamentally not in a place where they want them to fly more. The asset needs to be available when the owner wants it. So I think fundamentally, as we've seen with JetSmarter, which sold for pennies on the dollar, and we've seen with other models that are asset light, I think it's really hard to make the unit economics close. That said, I think Alex Wilcox, if you're here, you're a genius. I think JSX is a really clever model, and I think it's one that is very interesting. It makes the best use of the 380, 135 regulatory combo, and really targets regional air travel with bigger, fully depreciated jets in a very, very smart way. So I think that model, I suspect, will be replicated many times over. And I think, like, fundamentally, as most of you who are operators know, like, if you are in the asset-heavy business, the goal is to utilize your asset as much as you possibly can. And so a model where you're going after high-density routes is very clever.
Yeah, the JSX model is really interesting because if you look at the decline in regional air travel, it has to do with congestion, and it has to do with time through airport, because the costs for flying through the air are actually declining faster than auto costs. So I think what Alex is doing is really clever because he's sort of circumventing a lot of the factors that cause the decline of regional air travel just by being creative where he flies in and out of. And you're flying as part of 135, right? right, Tom?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Quick question for you, Bruno. You fly into, your video showed vertiports. Will you fly into regular airports as well? Is that part of your concept or not really?
Not really. We would add skyports to an existing airport. There's a good market. It's a great market between airports and other locations because of the constant stream both ways.
Right.
And, one of the problems with skyports, wherever they are, is that there's going to be a tendency for them to be busy part of the time, or much busier in one direction part of the time, and less busy at other times. So you end up flying about 25% of the airplanes empty.
Right, yeah, or 40% in Part 135 is closer to the mark, right? That's low utilization. There's a question for me here, which is, what was our experience in Mexico with Volaris? It's one of the reasons that we got interested in electric aviation, because we see the same conditions. We saw very little point-to-point flying in Mexico at the time, and prices were rising every year. Prices were declining every year in other markets in the world, and so we also saw about a half a person per capita per year flying, and that number was 4 when we got started in the U.S. So there was a lot of opportunity to stimulate, especially given Mexico had the largest bus market in the world. And if you look at this market for either fixed wing or UAM type aircraft, the type you're doing, Bruno, you can see some of the same conditions, which is there's opportunity for more direct point-to-point flying. Now, how that multimodal plays out, per your comments, Uma, is yet to be seen. And there's a ton of intercity traffic that's going on in cars. So if you can do that in a faster, particularly in a faster, but also more cost-effective way, where you're taking the cost per seat mile down from maybe 50 cents for a PC-12 to 20 cents or 15 cents, there's a lot of opportunity for stimulation. So that's the reason that we're excited about it. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Terrific panel and some really great insights. And hopefully we'll see this market grow a lot in the next few years.